So welcome back on this advanced use case about the inter-warehouse transfer. My name is Michael, and we are going to see what are the solutions to actually solve the use case that I presented earlier. But before starting anything, I think it's important to explain the business logic behind the use case that I presented earlier. So superstar supply chain is really a typical supply chain in the retail industry, meaning that you have the distribution center at the heart of the supply chain network that takes care actually of the AV operation, meaning the purchasing, unloading the supplier's trucks, labeling the items, or redispatching according to repartition keys. And of course, beyond that, you have the stores that revolve around the distribution centers. And the sole objective of the stores is actually to maintain an adequate level of stock and refurbish the shelves on a daily basis. Within this supply chain network, you have, of course, at the beginning of that supply chain, the supplier. At the very end, you have the customer. And in between, you have the different stock points for which the company needs to decide how it is going to maintain an adequate level of stock. The company could decide to go for a full push strategy, meaning that the products are pushed from the very bottom of the supply chain up until the customer's end. This is a forecast driven strategy, and it looks like the strategy that Superstars has decided to go for when it launched a new product range. So they decided to go for a full push strategy. You could also go for a full pull strategy, meaning then that your entire supply chain is customer driven, is demand driven. So it starts with a customer request and you move backwards in the chain of moves. But usually companies decide to go for a mix of both strategies. We then speak of decoupling points where both strategies meet. And for each decoupling point, we need to build a buffer stock. And for that, in Odoo, we typically use reordering rules to actually trigger and extend the pull strategy further down the chain by using this resupply mechanism. So how would it look like if we were to translate that in Odoo? Well, for each stock point, of course, and for each physical place, we will, of course, translate that into a warehouse in Odoo. And then we'll have a purchase order with its receipt to enter the items actually in the network. So that's the first arrow here. And then we will use an outbound operation from the central warehouse to send the items to a transit location. And we will then receive these items into the different stores using receipts. Why do we split actually the move between the distribution center and the stores into two moves? It's because we believe that there are different responsibilities. So for different responsibilities, we need different pickings. And we need a transit location to actually track the goods that are in transit between the two warehouses. So if we were to go for the first option, which is a full push strategy here, we would then create first a manual purchase order, which is the first arrow when you come into the distribution center. We would then dispatch the item from the central to that transit location, and we would then push the items to the stores by using push rules. The second option that we have would be actually to set automated replenishments, which are reordering rules, at key stock points to actually maintain minimum stock levels. And in between these automated replenishments, we would have pull mechanisms, routes that would actually take place, such as the resupply route between the store and the distribution center, and the buy route to the external supplier from the distribution center. And finally, we would have a third option that would be actually to use the semi-automated replenishment with the new manual reordering rule. So we will see later on how we can configure that. Okay, so now let's see how we can actually translate that full push strategy by configuring it into Odoo. So let's switch to our test database and let's go in the inventory app. In the settings, we are going to activate first the multi-steps routes and the storage location. We save it. We'll then add the new warehouses. As I said, each physical place is a warehouse. So I will create the distribution center. Let's give it DC as a short name. I will add an extra warehouse which is store 1, short name S1. And I will add store 2. Store 2. And that's it for the warehouses. Now that I have configured that, I will, of course, as a first step, add a transit location, which is by default archived in Odoo. So I will search for the transit location. I will filter on the archived one, and I will activate I will unarchive the current transit location. Additionally to that, I will create two sub-locations to my transit location. Why am I doing that? It will be actually interesting because I will use that sub transit location for my push rules. It will help me to actually generate the right receipt in the right destination warehouse. And I will also use it as a way to indicate to the user in the outbound operation from the distribution center uh, where the products are heading. Because if I were to keep only that generic transit location, it would be hard to tell for the operator to which destination warehouse I'm going to send the items. So actually creating different sub transit location per destination warehouse will help identifying the destination of the goods that I'm sending to the other warehouses. So I will, of course, create as many transit location, as many destination warehouses that I have. So here I created transit to store 1, and I'm going to create transit to store 2, which is also a child of interwarehouse transit. And again, I specify it as a transit location. Please bear in mind that products that are sent to transit location will be kept in the quantity on hand. It's rather a way for us to actually differentiate a bit that location from the actual internal type location. Also, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add a new operation type, which will be the inter warehouse operation. Why am I doing that? Is because I definitely prefer to differentiate the items that I will send to internal warehouses that are part of my supply chain network from actual deliveries to customers. So I don't want to actually use the same operation type as the one that I use for my customers. The idea here is actually that when I go to my inventory home page that serves as a dashboard, I can differentiate the operation that I do for internal operations and the ones that I do for customer deliveries. So here I will refer to that warehouse operation, inter-warehouse operation as an internal transfer. It is part, of course, of my distribution center. I won't create any lots or serial numbers. I will use the existing ones. And I will, of course, send the items from DC stock to a transit location. Here, I'm not specifying which transit location. I'm just specifying the main transit location. So I save this new operation type, and now I will create my route with my push rule to actually create that second step into the stores when I send the items to the transit location. So I will create a route that is called push to stores that will be applied at the warehouse level. So in my DC, in my store number one, and in my store number two. And I will create the push rule that will be activated when I send the items to the transit location. So I can say push to store one, I push to. I use as the operation type receipt in store one, and the trigger location here will be transit to store one. So basically what I'm saying is that every item that I sent to the transit location, transit to store one, should actually create a receipt in my main stock location of my store one warehouse. So I can do the same when I push the item to store two. Again, I use the push to action. I will use the receipt in store two. I will use as a trigger transit to store two, and there I am. I save my route, and now that I have created first my sublocations of transit, my new operation type, and finally my push rule, I can actually start my entire flow. So the first part of that full push flow, of course, is to buy the product to the supplier. So let's first create a product to that supplier. I will call it test product, storable one. You see, I just have the buy route activated. I will use Ether as my default supplier. And now that I have my product, I will first create my manual receipt to my distribution center. So I will buy in bulk this item to Ether, let's say 50 products. I'm going to receive it in DC. So that's the first operation when actually the purchase department places an order when there is a new product range that is launched by Superstar. They place that order and they receive it in the distribution center. So you see that I have my DC operation. I validate the receipt. And now I have 50 test products in my distribution center. You can see I have 50 of them in DC stock. The next step, of course, is to go in the overview, in the dashboard of the inventory, check the new operation type that I created, which is inter-warehouse operation. I do create a plan transfer. As you can see, it starts from DC stock, it goes to inter-warehouse transit. Here I'm going to specify exactly in which destination warehouse I'm going to send the item. Here I'm saying that I'm sending it to store one, and I decide to send, let's say, 30 items out of the 50 that I received in my distribution center to store number one. I save my picking and I mark it as to do. As soon as I mark it as to do, the push rule is activated and the system knows that I send 30 items to transit to store one. And for that, I will have a receipt in store one, which has been generated by my push rule. So as you can see here, I have now a receipt for 30 products in S1 stock, which is waiting another operation, meaning that I'm actually waiting for the previous operation that I raised. So now, of course, if I want to finalize the flow, I need to go back on my inter-warehouse operation. I need to check the availability to make sure that I have the product in stock, which is the case, and I can then validate the transfer to the transit location. So currently, if I double check again the inventory report, you'll see that I have 20 uh, products in DC stock, and if I remove the internal filter, I can see that I have 30 of them also in the transit to store one location. Finally, the final operation would be to transfer the items which are on the receipt in S1 stock. So I just validate here the receipt in S1 stock. So that's the first option that you have. You can go for a full push strategy where you purchase the item, you receive them in the distribution center. In the distribution center, you use that inter-warehouse transfer operation to dispatch the items to the different stores. And thanks to the push rules, a second move will be generated as a receipt in the store. That's the first option that you have. The second option that you have would actually be to create reordering rules in the different stock points that you have. Which means that first we need to reconfigure a bit the warehouses that we created. As I said at the beginning, purchasing activity only takes place for Superstar in the distribution center, which means that in the distribution center, we won't resupply from subcontractors or manufacturers to resupply, we will buy to resupply. That's the first configuration on the distribution center. The second option here is on store one. We need to deactivate all the resupply that would be by a manufacturer, but we are going to activate actually a resupply route from the distribution center. As we said, the store are actually doing internal resupply. So that's for store one, and we will do the same for store number two. So we come back here, we go on store number two, and we do exactly the same. We resupply, and we resupply from the distribution center. So what happens when I do this on the warehouses? Actually, if I go in the routes, you'll see that I have two additional routes that have been created. Store one supply product from distribution center and store two supply product from distribution center. And the buy route was adjusted. I don't have any rule that would be triggered from store one or store two because I said I don't want to purchase from these warehouses, but I can actually buy from DC stock as you see here. I want to adjust store one supply product from distribution center because I want to make it more perfect than it already is in standard. And here I'm going to first adapt the operation type to the new operation type that I created. And I will select the new sub location that I created to actually have better visibility over the transfers that I do. So I do that for store one supply route, and I do the same for my second route. So I select the new inter-warehouse operation, and I do select the new sub-transit location that I create. Here. So this is it. And the only step here that is left, at least for the routes, is to actually apply these new routes on my test product that I just configured before. Here on the routes section on the product. Finally, I'm going in the replenishment menu where I can activate the new reordering rules that I will define per stock point. So for instance, here for test product in DC stock, I want to maintain, for instance, a stock level of a minimum of 100. I will reach a maximum quantity of 120. I can define a similar replenishment strategy for S1, where I say that I want to maintain, for instance, 40 items in stock and max 40. And finally, I can create another replenishment strategy for S2 stock, where I want to maintain, for instance, 30 items in that warehouse. And as you can see here, the system automatically tells me what I should reorder as of now by comparing the forecasted quantity with the minimum quantity that I have set, as well as the max. And here what I'm going to do is that I'm going to automate the reordering rules that I have created. I don't want to take care of these reordering rules. I want the system to automatically do it for me. So here, when I've just created my replenishment rules, I will actually automate it. So I click automate order. It of course order for the first time or create the picking for the first time if I need to order something, but then in the future, it will automatically check the forecasted quantity and the evolution of that forecasted quantity, and I won't have to generate the items myself. So now if I check, I do have a purchase order which has been created for the test product. So if I do a check on the product, I now have purchase order that was raised automatically with my reordering rule number 7. And if I double check as well in the inventory home page, I probably have in the inter-warehouse transfer new pickings that have been raised. And as you can see, they all originate from the different reordering rules that I created. And if I open the first one, you can see here that I'm resupplying 10 test products from DC stock to my transit location, store one. So that's the option that you have if you want to automate and maintain minimum stock levels per stock point. You can actually activate replenishment for each stock point. Finally, the third option that we have would be to actually go in the replenishment and leave the replenishment as a manual replenishment. So I will actually change the trigger type on the reordering rule, and I will say that it is a manual replenishment now. Actually, I should remove the reorder. And here again, I switch it to manual. When this is done, for instance, I can create a sales order to decrease the forecasted quantity in store one, for instance. So let's create a big sale order from store one. It comes from store one. We validate, confirm, and we have of course a delivery for hundreds from store one, which will decrease the forecasted quantity. So if I come back here in my replenishment, now I see that in my reorder, the items that I need to reorder, I have now 100 to reorder from S1 stock. And the advantage of that is that I could use the order once option, which would actually use the default rule that I have set on the product, so resupply from the central warehouse. or I could actually deviate from that proposal from the system and actually choose another route, such as a buy route, for instance, to buy directly from S1. So the advantage of going for that third option would actually be that you have a dashboard of the quantities that you need to reorder. You can follow the proposal from Odoo in terms of quantities and of routes, but you can also deviate from the actual order that has been offered to you by Odoo. So you can decide, for instance, to reorder more and then to order once 110 items instead of 100. So how can we summarize that use case? Well, first, as I said before, you have three options. You can go for a full push strategy, you create a manual purchase order, you use a dispatch operation in your central warehouse, and you use push rules to actually push the items into the different stores. You can also go for a full push strategy, where you have reordering rules at your different stock points in the stores, in the central warehouse, and you use the different routes, the embedded routes that you have on the warehouses. You can also go for the semi-automated option, where you actually have a dashboard that helps you track the replenishments that you need to create, the quantities that you need to reorder. But the advantage of that is that you can deviate from the defined route on your product. One of the recommendations that I would have is that you go step by step when you implement the this use case. By that, I mean that I would advise you to go with manual operation first, apply the routes second, and think about reordering rules third. Also, you have endless possibilities, endless combinations using the routes in Odoo, but you have to keep in mind, you have to bear in mind that you have a single path that should be applied for each product. Beyond this single path, of course, you have to foresee the exceptions. And the exceptions, they can be handled, for instance, by using the routes on the sales order line, by using the request procurement option on the product, or by using the semi-automated replenishment, as I explained in my third alternative. Also, a tip that I would recommend here would be to have that extra operation type from the distribution center for traceability reason. As I said, it appears in your dashboard in the inventory app. And of course, you can use the extra transit location for visibility and for ease of use.